Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another workshop from Pivot. So today we have a very commonly asked question as our main topic. This is something that we have frequently thought about when we are searching for jobs or looking for any new type of role. Is how do we come up with a compelling pitch to convince recruiters, to convince hiring managers to hire us. Age old question, something that people have thought about for decades at this point. So why are we doing this today? Like, why are we talking about something that has been discussed so frequently? It's because the rules of the games have changed. It's not the same as what it used to be. Just winging it, kind of going in unprepared, thinking that you know the answer to all the questions, it's not a good strategy anymore. Even the typical preparation that a lot of candidates have to do or used to do earlier, given the current constraints of the job market and the type of competition that we are seeing in the job market, is not sufficient, right? So to talk about that and help us understand what kind of things actually work in today's job market, we have two amazing HR professionals. One is Siji Kuruvath from EY, and then we have Achala Bhat from Mintra, and they are here backstage. So I'll be bringing them up now with me. Okay, great. Hi, CG. Good evening, Achla. Good to have you both.
Hey Arjun,
Evening.
good to have you as well. Thanks for
All
joining.
right. Thank you for joining us today. I think, this is an interesting one. So I don't know if you have been following Pivot. I know you both are, industry mentors and have helped many other professionals kind of achieve their career goals in different ways. But one of the things that you might have seen, that apart from facing challenge even landing interviews, one of the new types of challenges people are facing is how to convert those interviews into full-time offers. And I was just saying behind the or on the stage, while you were behind the stage, that a lot of times people have started getting the initial round of interviews, but they get stuck, and then they keep giving the same round again and again with different companies, but don't make it pass, right? And there is something really lacking, which is causing that kind of situation for many candidates today. And in the recent past, there have been events that kind of tell us that what comes out of your mouth can have a really big impact on how people perceive you. So I think it's important to address this from a job search perspective as well. So we'll start with a quick round of intros. I can just quickly go first. And for those who don't know me, I'm the founder at Pivot. What we do here is help people make smooth and successful career transitions. And when I say career transition, it's not just any one type of transition. There could be very many different types. For example, whether you're changing your domain or industry, your level in the organization, um, moving geographies, or starting something of your own after a 9 to 5. All of these inflection points count as a transition to us, and that's where we specialize. So we'll talk more about like what exactly we do, how we help people during the course of this discussion. But for now, I would like to loop in both Achla and CG into the conversation. So thank you again both for joining me. Really excited to have you today. We can start with Achla. Achla, do you mind maybe just sharing a bit about yourself, like your journey and what you do today?
Sure. So I think really glad to be here, and glad to have this stage to be able to share my thoughts on this topic. Being associated with Pivot is somewhere it also further enhanced my knowledge about the whole gamut of interview world and so on. From an introduction perspective, I come with a work experience of about 12 years across seven different HR domains, and my current role is my seventh domain. When I got associated with Pivot, I was playing possibly my sixth role, and in between, I made two transitions amongst the roles myself, and that's where this comes in. So, have an exposure to interviews and also the really most of all these seven HR functions and roles that I've played throughout my career also. Aside of my work, I am a fitness freak, a published author. My solo publication is soon coming up, and also a solo traveler.
Okay, great, perfect. I I'm excited for the book, Achala. I didn't know about that, but I would love to read it whenever it comes out. Um, Siji, welcome again, and I think this might be the first time that you are here on the stage with us. So thank you again for your time and your expertise. But please go ahead and share a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Arjun. Thanks for inviting. This is super exciting. I remember joining Pivot and having my 2 hour sessions that I conducted. It's a different experience. You actually learn both ways as much as you share your experience. So thank you so much for inviting. I've been largely a talent acquisition guy throughout, close to 2 decades is what I've done. Extensive experience in scaling up of different teams, and unlike Achal, haven't done many pivots, but I've seen many pivots generally of individual moving from one role to another, and I think those experiences have kind of given a very deeper perspective of how it really works and what really works out. With that, I think happy, super excited to be here, happy to contribute, looking forward to the discussion.
All right, amazing. So let's get started. And just a side note, CG, it's Achala, just the pronunciation of Achala's name. Just wanted to correct that quickly. But so just be, yeah, as we kick this off, I think I want to start by sharing a recent incident that I got to hear from one of the Pivot users about their, interview experience. And I don't know how many people can resonate, but I feel like it's a pretty common theme out there in today's job market, especially that you have applied to a lot of roles before you hear back for an interview. So you may have applied to 70, 80, maybe sometimes even over 100 roles before you hear back. So by the time you're hearing back, you can feel a little jaded already, and you might not be fully prepared for an interview call. You might not be even expecting it. So you get a random call from a recruiter or a hiring manager, and they start blurting out all these questions about tell me about your experience, but more importantly they start by asking just the basics, like what's your expected CTC, what's your notice period, why are you looking out for a new role, is did something not work out at the last company, is that what's happening. So what I have realized through these conversations with pivot users, they always feel like the interviewer or the recruiter hiring manager is sort of against them when they are starting out. They feel like the questions are supposed to make them nervous, and like they're doing something wrong by even applying to that job, because there's something that some sort of a flag that has been raised usually in the first call itself. I'm talking about candidates who have good credentials, good qualifications, tier 1 company and educational experience as well. So there is this mindset that something is not very much aligned with the role that I have applied to right off the bat. So is this something that you have also seen in terms of hiring managers kind of positioning the opening questions to sometimes make candidates feel uncomfortable, deliberately, indeliberately? Like, what is the mindset for the hiring manager or the recruiter when they start by asking you questions? Achala, can we start with you, please?
I think two aspects is something a hiring manager would definitely look at, and as simple as this sounds, it's beyond the definition of it. One is technical fitment, and with from a skills or the competency fitment part of it, and the second aspect is of course culture fitment. Now it's important to understand that every company and every industry has a ratio of inclination towards each of them, and that is something as an interviewee it's my responsibility to also kind of do a bit of a research, maybe speak to people in the company, or just even a Google search or just a Glassdoor review search would indicate that to you. But it's important to realize that every company or an industry for that matter would have an inclination towards either of it in terms of ratio. It will never be 50-50. It will rarely be 50-50 rather. So pivoting onto this, I think to answer your question, when a hiring manager sets out puts out the role across. And this is something which will reflect in the job description also. What kind of competency are they more particular about, whether it's culture competency, culture fitment, or the skill fitment part of it. So the job description and even the kind of questions that come in the interview could be some indicators which will help you give you that point of at during that interview. Now, speaking, keeping myself into the shoes of the hiring manager, a lot of times the skill sets that we are looking for, unless there are indeed some very niche skills for which the resources, or the talent pool outside itself could be very restricted. Especially it comes to whenever we speak of certain technical skills. But as a hiring manager, I think goes without saying that a large part of the interview structuring as well as questions will also be surrounded around what is the whether the candidate is reflecting the values that you're looking for, some of the behavioral skill sets. Say for example, if a role requires you to be very good in stakeholder management, how much are you excelling into it? Can you quantify those with some substantial examples, and also with some star method and all these aspects, which I'm sure we would touch through the course of these discussions. So I think when a hiring manager is bringing forth these questions, that is what goes into their mind, which in turn I would again put it back to the interview or interviewee also to do that research on two aspects, which I feel I want to bring out through this conversation, that which as an interviewee, somewhere all of us, as well as any average any general interviewee out there, would sometimes not prioritize, which is to understand the culture of the company and do a bit of a research even on the interviewer. what kind of uh, what kind of journey do have they had, what kind of skill sets possibly they focus on, without calling the names of the companies. If they have spent say 15 years in a particular company which prioritizes innovation development, is into product development, you will see that flavor in that interviewer quite naturally. They may it possibly they are also, it's so ingrained in them. 15 years is a very long time. It possibly comes through them. So I think it's something as an interviewee also, what we miss out on is researching on these nuances, that ratio between the skill fitment as well as the culture fitment, what could be
Right.
for this particular interview, and also a bit of a research on the interviewer also. And that's very simple. It's just go on onto their LinkedIn profile. If they don't have a profile, that is also some kind of point of view rather.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I think we'll definitely jump into the whole preparation aspect as to. I think these are fantastic points. So we'll detail them out, Achala, in the next segment of this discussion. But CG, just your thoughts on same question, right? Like, what is the hiring manager or recruiter's mindset? Because again, I want to reiterate the fact that a lot of people have this perception that the recruiter or hiring manager is biased against them in some form or fashion. The number of times I've heard, my number of years of experience is not working for me. So like kind of ageism. My fact that I'm a woman and might get married soon or might have kids soon is not working well for me. The fact that I have changed companies too many times is not working for me. The fact that I have stayed at a company for too long is not working for me. There are so many of these types of biases, hesitations that people feel that recruiter and hiring managers have today. So as a recruiter yourself for quite some time, what is the trend? I mean, is this true? Is this how generally hiring managers and recruiters are? And if not, like, what is it that they really are considering when they are interviewing people?
I think I will try and answer this from different perspectives. I think one thing's for sure, Arjun, is that the recruiters and hiring managers needs to be more kinder in the interview process, because it's not easy. It's not easy to apply 100 jobs and you land like one interview. So there's a lot a candidate goes through. So I think it's bare minimum to be kind. But that being said, I think there are different perspectives, right? Recruiters are overloaded. The organizations keep a very short staffed. set of individuals who would then do many positions, and they were always in a rush to go out in an interview. One interview is done, they're on to next one, right? So that's one part of it. And the other thing is with the hiring managers, what is happening is, I think the priorities are important, right? So obviously they're managing their businesses, talking to candidates. But outside of that, I think what I see, what hiring managers need in nutshell, Arjun, is what is the learning curve of the candidate, right? How shorter is the learning curve of the candidate? And I think that is what they're interested in. So if you are, and I'm pretty sure when we reach our interview prep, and there's going to be a lot more that we will talk about in that section, but I think it is going to be extremely important for candidate to break the ice sometimes. Whenever you are in an interview, it's always good to carry a smile. It's infectious. Sometimes you also pass on to your interviewer, right? So they may be 10 other things that's bothering them, but the onus is on both sides, right? So it is on the candidates and as well as on the interviewer. And if you haven't seen that from the interviewer, give your positive vibes to the interviewer as well, right? So bring that positivity to your discussion, and don't let it impact you too much, because if you get too worked up about smaller things in the discussion, then that will impact you further, and it just goes down the spiral, and then all the discussion that's going to come in that conversation is not going to be very good, right? So don't let it impact you. Go out with a smile, be positive, realize that each of those individuals, whether it is a recruiter or hiring manager, come from a very different perspective. They've got other things working out for them, not working out for them. Go prepared, because I think that's going to be important, which we're going to talk about right now. And take it on a positive stride is what I would actually put up with.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's helpful, CG. I think your first point, about recruiters, hiring managers, perhaps trying to be a little kinder, definitely would do a lot of good to the interviewing world. I don't know how much of it that is practical, given that everybody is sort of swarmed with work, and they're also trying to just do their best and get by. So people, despite their best intent, sometimes just are overloaded and jaded themselves. But I think the more helpful thing, which I think candidates can have more control over, they don't have control over the recruiter mindset. But what they do have control over is knowing that, they should not necessarily get phased by
Absolutely.
harsh questions that
Yeah.
might make them feel, underprepared or the wrong fit because of certain biases that the recruiter might have. I think a lot of people today get very put off if they get asked questions where they can't help but answer, objectively, and then they get penalized for
Yeah.
answering that. Like,
And
yes,
and
if I'm
Arjun, the way
getting
I will also look at it is that we work in a very diverse set of environment. People come from diverse background, different upbringing. So I think the perspective is always going to be different. So I think it is also important, like you mentioned, to kind of have that broader understanding to say that the intentions are good, the biases could exist, but I think that's what you're trying to navigate in an interview.
correct. Yeah. Right. All right. So that's helpful. The next thing that I want to touch upon, and I think this is where we will spend majority of our time, is in regard with the interview preparation, the art and science of doing that. And I think both of you have already touched upon it, and there's so many aspects to it. So the way I want to structure that, because I don't want people to get overwhelmed, like how much work they have to do in this. So if we can maybe think about, in your own experiences, Achala, especially you as a candidate navigating tricky job markets, and also as a hiring manager, and CG, for you especially as a recruitment professional, how would you structure this sort of this um, complex art of preparation? Because sometimes when people ask us, it's more about that they know how to answer the questions, they're just nervous in terms of being eloquent and being confident, right? Sometimes people don't actually know their stuff as well, right? They haven't done the proper preparation, so they feel underprepared because they actually don't know how to answer certain questions that might come up, especially like if they have any non-linear parts to their journey. For example, if I have changed companies too many times, and I haven't really thought about why I have done that. And if it comes up, I don't know how to answer that. And obviously, any like technical, interview question which will have a direct impact on whether I'm shortlisted. So sometimes people don't prepare for that. So one is, preparing. Then it's about like practicing. How do I actually practice so that I get better at answering those questions? And the third part is also getting feedback, because sometimes when you're practicing, you don't know if you're coming up with the right answers, or presenting them in the strongest manner. So if we can sort of break it down into these three, at least in my view, it would help. If you have another way to structure the preparation, I'm more than open to it. But three things, which is, first, actually preparing talking points or what your answers should be. Second is practicing, so that you're getting the right words in an eloquent manner. And third would be getting feedback. If we can talk about that, Achla, we'll again kick off this with you.
I think to start with, from a preparation point of view, it's always in addition to the pointers that I was earlier mentioning. So apart from the part that the very obvious pointers like going through the JD and being thorough with your work, I want to kind of bring forth some of the aspects which unintentionally do get missed out, and that is about really writing down the answers that you would have to share. And what answers would they be? I think the first step to that is to first look at the job description and look at some of the requirements, the key skill sets, both behavioral as well as the hard skills that have been mentioned. So looking at them and preparing your instances for them, the projects that you worked in previously. And this, I'm of course speaking from a perspective of lateral hires, experienced hires, someone who comes with an experience. Preparing your own script of your experience for each of those skill sets, because as a hiring manager, I would be interested to know your how have you lived up to stakeholder management and those specific examples, and how accurately or how fluently you can articulate them. Because even a chat gpt can give you an answer of example of stakeholder management, but if you have lived through that journey, the way you would articulate would be very different. You'll see that in your eyes. Someone would be very passionate about something that they would have done it themselves. So, and I'm stressing on writing it down because that's a fallacy even I fell into. I always thought I'm a great public speaker, or I can just say that answer in the interview. I'll have no trouble coming up with an answer until for in a particular interview, I was asked about a particular project for which I had won one of the reputed awards, and I was not able to articulate that. Now, it goes on to portray to a hiring manager who does not know me personally or who hasn't worked with me, it goes on to portray, unfortunately, that maybe I wasn't very deeply involved, intently involved in the project, which was not the case. But that portrayal did come into picture because of my lack of preparation of that, the way I would kind of structure that whole project that I had worked on, how the requirement came in until how we measured the impact and everything. That was the first time even I drafted that answer for it, and the subsequent interviews I was able to share that. And through this example, I wanted to highlight that part of preparation which is often overlooked. We all think, oh, I've worked on this, I used to work 18 hours on this, how can I not word it out? And which is precisely, you may not be able to word it out clearly because it's so much in your head, it has to come into words. So which is why it's important to note it down. That's from a preparation point of view. Sorry, the second one was on
Practicing.
practicing. Yeah. I have a very unpopular answer to this. Practicing does come very on the job. Given majority of my life, I've played the role of an L&D professional. I think that's why kind of endorsing the on the job aspect a lot. And on the job in this case becomes giving in more interviews, and which is why I think to a lot of people I do coach, I do tell them that the way to measure your hit rate during a job search is how many interviews you're landing. Of course, one of those interviews will land you the job that you want, but the more the interviews and the more better you'll be able to practice. But having said that, in absence of that, one way to practice them is, again, once you've scripted out these answers, it's to read it aloud and time yourself. Are you, even after scripting that out, are you still, from your urge of being so passionate about that project, are you still adding 4 sentences in between, and are you still running overtime? So some of these aspects, because for all you know, you've gotten just a 30-minute interview slot. Again, like you were saying, we all have day jobs, and in between that we cull time out to hire for to be a part of interviews and so on. So I think, if from a preparation perspective, it's essential that you practice those answers out and time them specifically, because time will be of essence. You are given just a particular X number of minutes with the interviewer. So in absence of interviews lined up for you, I think this would be one way to it. And the third one, sorry, that was on the impact of it.
No, that was more like, how do I know that I'm preparing in the right way? So how do I get feedback from the perspective of another person? Or, I mean, I know there are a lot of AI tools today that also do that, but yeah, please go ahead, Achala. How do we
Yeah.
assess that we are on the right path in terms of prep?
Yeah, I think a very good question, and important to also kind of account for. The first and foremost way, I think, would be to really find a coach for yourself. This could be, if you're very lucky, you'll find an offline coach, your ex-manager, your some a friend of yours, also someone you trust with. It's okay if you don't have them in your life. There are platforms like Pivot itself, and where you can absolutely, and I know Pivot does a very customized matchmaking, for lack of better words, and it's not a random allotment of coaches. I think long answer short is to find a coach who can guide you through it. And get your interview prep done by them, because only then you might time yourself, you might write that script yourself. But so it's really the net practice, right? Like how it happens in sports, you always have a coach and a physio who's kind of overseeing the net practice that you're doing. So which is why having a coach is very crucial. Find them in your circle. Take this as a part of your interview preparation itself, of finding a coach who will help you through the interview process.
Yeah, got it. Thanks for that, Achal. I think very comprehensively covered, and I think a lot of really good points. I think what you have shared should, to some extent, in my view, be sort of a Bible of how to prepare. I think these are the core fundamental tenets of interview preparation. CG, I'll ask the same question, but and feel free to structure it in the same way if you'd like. If you can maybe just also share some one or two examples of, like, because you must have interviewed so many candidates, I assume, if you can perhaps share examples of where you saw that this person clearly had prepared well, and what you thought went behind the scenes in that preparation, versus most candidates who don't land a job when you interview them, where do they typically falter? What are the common pitfalls? If you can share those two types of scenarios or examples, that would be great.
Yeah, yeah. But before that, let me just start with on the prep side, and I think the prep is the more important part. Like Achala also mentioned, I think the prep is something that you should actually start with your own profile. There's what happens over the year is that you work at so many places, you worked on so many projects. There are areas in your profile that you actually tend to oversee. So it's extremely important to know your profile really well, understand all of the experiences that you have in your resume, make a sense out of it as to what you've really done. Can you really talk about it? Because if you've not done the work there, having all that experience doesn't matter, because if I'm looking at the resume, I'm going to probably touch upon a particular aspect and ask you a question. But if there is no prep done on it, or if you've not really made your mind how do you want to present that particular aspect of the work, then it's not going to help, right? So for me, knowing your profile is extremely important. Know your job description or role. By that I don't mean you to by heart your job description, or go line by line, but look at the essence of what the role is, and knowing the role, how does that align to your profile? Where is the strength? Because when you do that analysis, where is that you're overlapping, when you're answering a question to an interviewer, you're able to make better sense of those questions, because you understand what is really needed, right? The third element which you actually need to know well is the organization that you're really getting in. The pluses and minuses both. It's not always pluses, right? And the reason you need to know more, because the more you are aware of, the more comfortable you will be in the discussion. There's no blind spot, right? Because you're pretty much aware, and there could be any subject, because the interview discussions usually aren't a transactional discussion. Sometimes it's very broad spectrum on what's really happening out there, and when you really know your organization, what are they really up to at this point in time, it gives you a much more a deeper set of talking points for you to cover in the conversation, right? And lastly, know your panel. Spend time in going through their profile. Have they worked? Are they founders? Where have they educated? Where have they done their undergrad from? Are they premier B school educated, tier one B school educated, tier two, whatever, right? So you see a certain pattern, you make a story out of that person looking at that LinkedIn profile, or any other profile where you can get your hands off, right? Or you have a reference in that organization. When you've done all of this, it gets you a good sense of control. The only thing someone becomes nervous in an interview is because they don't have a sense of control. You know what? I'm not really aware of what's going to come my way. When you've pretty much done all of these, you pretty much know, whatever comes your way, you'll be able to kind of answer, right? Now, what works when someone really gives an interview is how comfortable they are in the discussion. When someone's nervous, it shows. The recruiter will be able to see within few seconds that you're nervous. Now, being nervous is not wrong. Okay, but what happens when you're nervous is that you're not able to give your 100%. You are pretty much distracted. You're thinking about what's going to come next. Is there something that is going to get asked? What if I don't know? Be comfortable with yourself. Be comfortable with the environment. Reach early. Know your panel. Know your company. Know your profile. Know your job description. When you're there and you're comfortable, and I've seen those candidates who know all of these are much better poised to give a good interview, right? Conversion to when a candidate comes off the door, they're trying to be very confident. You could see it, but when you ask them a question, they give a very long answer, and somewhere you could see through those long answers that you're trying to give an answer or give a response to kind of say cover up your anxiousness or a certain topic that you're not too comfortable with, right? So it is extremely important for you to do all the prep on the prep side, which you just mentioned, Arjun, which is around practicing and prepping up yourself. I think on that front, I would say that do it like Achala mentioned. Write it down. Fabulous point there, right? When you write it down, you kind of seen it once, it just imprints on your mind. You're not going to forget it. But don't run it too much, because if you run it too much, you tend to get overpowered just by the content. You don't want that to happen, right? You want it to be just there with you in your subconscious mind. So if someone asks you a question, you're just there to kill it, rather than trying to remember, oh, what was the second point, what was the third point. That is not a good strategy.
Right. You don't want to sound like over rehearsed and you kind of crammed your answer in a way where you get thrown off if you don't remember the next point that's coming. Yeah, that's valid. Yeah, no, makes sense. I think, one of the things that you both have mentioned, and, we have started frequently seeing a lot of differences between the outcomes for people who do this versus who don't. I'd love to know your take on this. And this is a little off script here, but a deeper dive into what both of you have suggested just now is, the art of understanding the organization that you are pitching to or you're interviewing with, as well as the panel. These two things, I think, confound a lot of people more than we think it might. Because, see, people know themselves. They know what they have done in their careers. They have lived with themselves and their careers. They don't know the organization they are interviewing with. And a lot of times we work with people, I know you both have helped them. We work with people who are making some sort of a core element shift. So they are actually even more so out of their element. They are going into a new pond, not just swimming in the same pond from one spot to another. They're going to a new pond. So when that happens, what suggestions would you have to kind of get to understand the organization better. And obviously, I think, CG, like you were pointing out for other things, there has to be a balance. You don't need to obsess over it to the point where need to know each and everything about the organization or the interviewers. But what would be a winning strategy in this particular sphere, um, to get to know the organization better, so you can flex that, hey, I have done my homework, I know the context, and I can, rather than giving a broad open-ended answer, I can actually think about it from your perspective, from the hiring manager perspective, for example. How do we do that, Achala? I mean, take a second to think about it, because maybe you weren't expecting this specific question, but let me know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah. No, I do. And I was kind of thinking when you were asking this question, having been on both sides, being a hiring manager as well as multiple interview experiences myself, I think there are two, three ways which could give a near definitive peek into the organization and the organization culture per se. About the role, of course, I think the great indicator is the job description itself. And I think please feel free to use interview as in itself as a forum and specifically with the hiring manager to know more about the role. But from a perspective of trying to know more about the organization, two, three pointers I would like to share, which could still give a good headway into it. One is the kind of how their LinkedIn pages and how their other social handles are, and what kind of news updates are you seeing about them, and also again with a pinch of salt. Look, because in the age of social media, someone could pick in some extract and share their opinion over it. Do take it with a pinch of salt. But especially the official social media handles that the company might have where you're interviewing could give a good glimpse of it, because they will speak about the values they live by. They will speak about if the organization is the one, someone in that organization has indeed thought through all these aspects. They will speak about the kind of events that happen. And if you have an acquaintance in the firm, please feel, that would be a near good shot again, because I wouldn't say it as a complete good shot, because that person is again viewing that organization from the lens and the criteria they have for their own career journey. But to a certain extent you could. But I think point one, social media handles is somewhere where you could still understand what's happening in that company, what kind of investments are they making into people, their values, and so on. The second area is also on the corporate website, and while every company lists in plethora of information on their corporate websites, but what kind of values or what kind of stories are they saying? Are they speaking about? For example, if a company is speaking a lot about their stories about sustainability or CSR, and if that's a value you truly resonate with, which a lot of people do, specifically from the Gen Zs, and there's a report around it. So if that's a value you do resonate with, then I think that's a good indicator that you might be a culture fit over there. So this is one. This is another aspect of it, and it comes under the larger bucket of the social media handles again. The Another aspect I would like to also mention is again some of the leaders, the kind of what are they, what kind of journey have they had. If you see a particular person, a leader in C-suite in that company who has who was possibly a chartered accountant and now he's the head of graphic designing, completely contrast skills, that just speaks for itself that the organization truly values how quickly you learn, your agility and your other soft skills over possibly your technical core competency. So this is another way that you would possibly able to gauge that. And apart from, of course, the direct ways where you can absolutely ask the hiring manager and the other interviewers that you would interact with, where you can clearly ask what kind of values does the company promote, and how have they felt about their journey in that company. In if especially if there is an interviewer who has spent substantial amount of years, I think that's a perfect question for them. Or even otherwise, even if they have themselves recently joined. So some of these aspects can give you a bit of a peek into the organization. But I want to I'm kind of able to see some of the questions that are coming, and I want to try to one important aspect. A lot of times we go, it's again a bias that even we as interviewees have. XYZ
Right.
company that has a great brand comes in Fortune uh, XYZ list and so on, and it could be your dream company. Absolutely, it's valid to have those dreams, but what would matter in the long run really is how much do you resonate with the values of that company? How much do you resonate with the work style that the
Hmm.
company has? Which again, you will gradually, you should definitely make that attempt through your interviews also.
Yeah.
So do not take it to heart if that dream company of yours did not convert you for something like a culture fitment. I think you should just take it as a rejection is redirection kind of a thing. However harder pill that is to swallow, that is, you did not convert your dream company, you should still see that it's okay. I wasn't a culture fit. Maybe I would have felt like quitting in a year or so. Then what would have been the point? I would again get asked in the future interviews that, oh, you left this place in a year, which you said was your dream company. So I think it's okay for that to happen. Just wanted to tie
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, the best lift me up phrase that I've heard on this sometimes, friends telling other friends when they didn't get a job offer is like it's their loss, not yours. So think of it that it wasn't meant to be, and sometimes it's not just that you are losing out. Sometimes actually the organization also lost out. That could have happened as well. But CG, I would love to get your thoughts on this quickly, and yes, then we do have a quite a few questions that have started coming in. So yeah, if you can share your thoughts, like how should candidates think about preparing for knowing the organization better and kind of contextualizing their pitch, their interview answers more, that would resonate with that particular organization in a
Yeah.
genuine way.
Yeah. So Arjun, what Achala mentioned, they're fantastic points. I don't think I would have too much of a different perspective, but the way I will look at it is there are two aspects when you would want to prepare, right? One is more of a hygiene information about an organization that's available on Wikipedia or on their website, which gives you fair amount of facts about that organization and deep dive about what's their history and stuff like that, right? That's important to know because you just can't be too oblivious about it to not aware of. The second part is more deeper, and it just can't be prepared overnight. While you can do if you would want to, but ideally you would have a set of interests. Like Achla mentioned, you will have a set of interests that you would follow, whether it is sustainability, whether it is community, whether it is AI, and you would be obviously following that trend. And if the organization that you're aspiring to, you're part of it, over the period of time you would have gathered enough and more information to know what's really happening, what's their white paper, what's their thought leadership on that subject. Because if you know a deeper view on those particular aspects, it becomes much more easier for you to have conversations or be ready when you're actually out there and giving an interview, rather than, for example, in cases of where you have absolutely new organization, obviously you could just take a time out and prepare, talk to people, stuff like that. But it's good to kind of go via the competencies that you're trying to apply, and then look at the work the organization has already done. So when you are trying to get yourself aware, then you do have more relevant information about that subject that you're trying to give interview for.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. All right, with that, let's get into some of the questions here. So we have actually the first two questions. I was just going through them, somewhat, broader in nature. I'll actually pull up the first one. Um, I hope you both can also see it. It's from Pratik, and this question is about the fact that he has given two interviews after his recent graduation, or he's still, I guess, final year BTech student. Has not been selected in those interviews, and he has next one coming up. and really wants to make it count. So, what are some of the things he can do to improve his chances? So, I think, CG, I would love for your take on this, given that you're specially focused. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're especially focused on early stage
Yeah.
career recruitment, right?
Yeah.
I think Prateek could potentially be, similar to a lot of the candidates who you might have come across. So, again, I know it's a broader question. How would you help Prateek or a person like Prateek understand the best ways to learn from what rejections might have happened already, and kind of prepare better for the upcoming one?
Yeah, I think rejections are going to be part of the process, Pratik. I think that's going to be more important to realize. Like I think Achala also mentioned that it's part of the process. So you will learn more from those processes than selection process themselves. So take it at that bit. But for the interviews that you are about to come, Pratik, good luck. Wish you all the best. I think the way I would want you to do, I would request, is one, spend time in knowing the organization, like we just spoke about. Understand the area that you're interested, you would want to make your career in. Learn about it, get yourself acquainted with that information. Outside of that, when individuals who are recent pass out, interviews don't necessarily look for technical skills, right? They look for overall aptitude of the candidate. How quick you'll be able to understand the work, how quick you'll be able to take up new role. What's your aptitude to learn new skills? I think some of the things are the focus. Your flexibility to maybe take up something new that comes your way. If you get more situational questions, how do you really come up with an answer to that? I think it is more important to, one, go holistic and don't get too worked up about the skills at the level that you are in, because if you're starting your career, it is more softer skills in terms of how you present yourself, what's your thought process, what's your flexibility, what's your can-do attitude that you really bring to the table. I think some of those softer skills matter more in early career interviews than just the hard skills. The hard skills come by once you have some experience.
Yeah, makes sense. And Achala, any thoughts that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think nothing. I think nothing additional. And in fact, I was looking forward to Suji's answer because, as a talent acquisition lead, there are a lot of, ironically, that's recruitment is one role I haven't played of the seven roles that I've played. So, I was more of looking forward to that, but agreed to that. And uh, I know this would sound like again a harder pill to swallow, Pratik, but two interviews, it's like a warm up for your workout. You're good to go. Maybe you'll sprint much better in your third one, and good that you reflected as much. You're already onto that path of reflection, so I'm sure you would do well in the next.
Yeah, there's some hygiene I'll leave you with, Pratik, quickly. One is, reach your interview place sooner, get familiarized with the environment. It's good to just soak in the environment. Sometimes the environment is so new that that itself makes you nervous. This grand lobby and this very cold reception area with heavy AC flowing. So just make yourself comfortable, move around, grab yourself some tea, coffee, water, get yourself familiarized with that environment, and just go with the flow. Don't get worked up too much. You'll do good.
That's very encouraging. All right, so let's move on to the next one. Similar question. I just want to talk about the fact that people obviously face rejections, right? So I think this one is similar. It's actually talking about the fact that this individual's friends are getting offers at different companies. It seems like Deloitte and Amazon, etc., and he himself is getting rejected. I just want to share a small factoid here for this audience member. The richest person we know in the world today, who might be conceived as the most successful person we know in our world today, which is Elon Musk. If you go to YouTube, you will find some videos of him talking about trying to get an interview, not even going to do an interview or give an interview, but trying to get an interview by going to the headquarters of his dream company, spending 2 weeks waiting in the lobby, trying to get a hold of anybody who would let him in to interview with the mid-level manager for a normal engineering job, like very traditional engineering job, just because it was his dream company. Spent 2 weeks trying to do that, didn't break through it, right? Never got to actually give an interview. And so essentially, if you just look at that segment of his life, you might consider that as a big failure. But like Achala and CG have been pointing out, there are a lot of rejections that almost anybody, no matter how successful they have been, they will face. In fact, a lot of times the most successful people have also faced the most amount of rejections because they have tried the hardest to achieve a lot of these things. So I just want to share that small snippet of a experience that maybe a lot of people don't know, because they just see the successful side of the most wealthy or the most high achievers out there. But there is a lot of rejection and a lot of you know heartburn and kind of dismissals they have faced in their lives. Anything else you would like to add? Because I know we have just discussed a similar kind of a question previously.
I wanted to maybe
CG.
give a shot at it. Yeah, I think these are more softer aspects than just interview. I think one is I would request to not get overwhelmed with with your peers landing jobs. I think you should look at yourself as separate and not get stressed out by that. Secondly, don't judge your success by the company where you work at. And it is not just going to be the fangs of the world that's only the one that can give you success, right? It could be any organization as far as you're very passionate about it. You do fantastic work, you can be successful in any organization. So your colleagues landing a job in Fang doesn't necessarily mean you necessarily are not able to kind of get through with any successful. So don't compare it as what my limited point is. I'm sure you'll do fantastic in other opportunities where that comes your way. You could start differently. I've started differently and I've landed wherever I've landed, right? So not necessarily that there is one rule to measure everything, right? So don't get overwhelmed by that.
Yeah, fair point. Let's, in the interest of time, we'll go to the next question, and this one is also shown here on the screen. So this is from Banushri, and I think she has this right mindset, which she says interviews go both ways, and the question is, what are some of the green flags? What are some of the green flags that an interviewee should spot or look out for? That's an interesting question. Achala, would love to get your take on this first. Yeah, I think most people are so concerned about the red flags. And I think it's great that somebody has asked this question about what are the positive signs that we should be looking out for, that the interview is going well and I'm doing generally well in the interview.
Yeah. I think the way I understand the question is, what could be the green flags in the interviewer themselves? Is That's my understanding of the question. And
Yeah, right. Correct.
yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah. So I think three crisp pointers, all self-explanatory, but I'll possibly elaborate a bit at the end once I list them down. One is they do give space for you to ask as many questions as you want, and would rather prioritize that over what they have to ask you, and and to a certain extent, and keeping that ratio aside. But they do give a space where they also ask you to ask questions to them, which shows that they are okay to be challenged, they are okay to be held accountable for any answers that they have to give. I think that's a very good sign an interviewer could have. That's one green flag. The second one is also on how keen are they to really understand your career journey. And again, at Pivot, Arjun, you would have, Siji would have, and even I do. A lot of people come with their own journeys, which are, for lack of better words, not very perfectly written. Life situations or their own personal choices, they might have made some unconventional career choices or personal choices. So if an interviewer is open to hear that out, and also not label it under under whatever gamut they want to label it. I think that would be another green flag that shows that they are really open to offbeat suggestions that you would make when you're working with them, and also the fact that they would be open to encourage you, and they would empower you in the kind of career trajectory that you would want for yourself also. The third and the final point I would definitely touch upon, and it's very unconscious and comes very naturally to all of us, I would say, is the interviewer taking an interest or maybe asking you questions on the things that you also do as outside of your work. Because let's admit, while we do say personal and professional life, all of us do take our personality to work. And that personality is a byproduct of everything, where upbringing, the things we do outside of work. If we are an active athlete, for example, outside, that would somehow show up, that spirit, that kind of mindset would show up at work. So we are never disjoint. So if an interviewer does take an interest, or at least asks a question or two about, to try to know more about it, that shows that they are curious, and curiosity is a great trait for anyone to have. And even more so if that's a leader, that someone in the C-suite that you're speaking to, and they exhibit this trait, I think that's even better, because curiosity, I think, for whatever reasons, it dwindles as we all move up the ladder.
All right, I think you covered it all. I'll take up one more question before we wrap things up. And this one is from Pavan. And it's an interesting question. I think, I haven't thought a lot about it because, it's been some time since the pandemic's been over. But I myself have interviewed candidates when we are hiring at Pivot online. So the question is, he's good at doing face-to-face interviews, but not really for online meetings. He feels like that's really setting him back. Um, so, CJ, do you still do online interviews, or is it mostly in person now?
We still do, and it has become more convenient. It has become more
Uh-huh.
acceptable, because earlier it was, in person, and candidates do prefer to kind of, balance everything. They can, continue to work and also give an interview. So increasingly now virtual interviews have become important. But that being said, I think Pawan's point, I think both are very different. Unfortunately, I completely agree. You can make much more better impact on an in-person interview vis-a-vis to a virtual, and hence it requires a slightly bit more effort when you kind of look at it. So, making yourself out there, cut off from distraction, clear out your space, and prep well, and ensure that you try to be engaging more with your interviewer. Because if you're sitting in front, it's very easy to see that you are engaged, you're listening to me, I can see the body language. The issue with a virtual interview is that I only see a partial of you on the screen, and within that, it's very difficult for an interviewer to make a sense of all the commitments that they would look at in a candidate, and hence it requires slightly more effort from that standpoint. But I'm sure there's enough and more resources available, Pawan, if you can just go through that. But accept the fact that virtual interviews are tougher that way.
Yeah. All right. I think, yeah, that's a definitely kind of a new dynamic that people have to grapple with over the last 3-4 years since the pandemic has come around. And I think the tips were quite helpful, CG. Thank you for sharing that. All right. I think with that, we have come to a close on today's session. And first of all, I want to just thank again Achla and CG for making time for this. We covered a lot of ground. To be honest, we had even more points to go through. Like we were going to talk a little bit about how to build better rapport with your interviewer, whether it's online or it's in person. We're going to talk about offer negotiation. So maybe these questions that we could not cover, in case people in the audience, if you're thinking about these questions, please reach out to folks like Achala and Siji. They are both industry experts on our platform at Pivot. The link for their the mentor profile is shared in the chat section. So if you feel like they could be helpful to you, or perhaps another expert on the platform could be helpful, please feel free to check it out. But yes, apart from that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining in on Thursday evening. And I hope the session was enjoyable and insightful to you. And again, once again, thank you so much, CG and Achala, for your time and expertise. Really, really glad to have done this with you.
Thanks, Arjun.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.